I'd never really thought I could or would or should do a ballet about Nijinsky. Because I find that it obviously could not be a documentary that I would do, and to try to reconstruct something that he had danced, it is more a theoretical process than an artistic one. The first work that I did about Nijinsky, called Vaslav, which was to the piano music that he would have choreographed had he stayed with the ballet, with Diaghilev's Ballet Russe, was simply to use that music for a gala, a Nijinsky gala, to bring all the guests of the evening together in a kind of divertissement. But I had invited Patrick Dupont to be part of it. And so I started to work with Patrick on this music, Johann Sebastian Bach. And suddenly fragments of Nijinsky were there. And so, because these pieces were the actual music that Nijinsky had intended to choreograph, the ballet became sort of the steps he never made, interpreted by different guests of the gala. One of them was Judith Jamison, for whom I invented a very special solo. And I think I had never intended it actually to even to be any kind of description of Nijinsky, but then it was. And then I think when I did Sacre du Printemps, Le Sacre I called it, I was influenced by the description of his last dance in the Soubrette House in 1919, when his wife, Romola, said, "Now I will dance the war that you could not prevent." And so the chosen maiden, in a sense, was, in the original version, completely naked and danced this last solo, and it was very much thinking about Nijinsky. But then, in just before 2000, which would have been the 50th anniversary of his death, or which was the 50th anniversary of his death, there was to be an exhibition. And I had by that time amassed quite a large collection concerning Nijinsky. It is now even much larger. And I was asked to donate, or not to donate, but to lend pieces for this collection, which I had never done before. And I thought I really should do that. But in deciding to do that, I thought my contribution to celebrating his life must be in my own words, in my own medium, in dance. And it was that made me decide to do, in 2000, this work called Nijinsky. Actually, as I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where to start, where to stop. And so what has come out of it is it's not at all documentary. It begins quite realistically in the Soubrette House, 1919, as he is to dance for the last time. And I recall that in his London season 1916, after he left Diaghilev, that he imagined at one moment performing that he saw Diaghilev in the audience. And I used that premise for the piece, that he is performing and sees Diaghilev, which sort of sends off a series of memories of the Ballet Russe, of his relationship with Diaghilev, his relationship to Romola, And then in the second part to the Shostakovich 11th Symphony, a more inward journey, but ending in the same place, because we see the same Soubretta house, but as if it had been bombed, as if it were a war, because Nijinsky also said that it's not Nijinsky that's mad, it's the world that's mad. When I decided to do the work, I had a very good friend, a Swiss friend, who had good connections somehow everywhere. And not only did I visit the Soubretta house, where I was given the privilege of actually, because no one knows exactly which room it was, but I believe I know, because when I entered this particular room, it was clear to me that this had to be it. Also because of the descriptions of that situation, the fact that there was a raised part of it where there had been tables for people drinking tea and so on. And I photographed every detail of this room. I was given historical photos of that room by the Soubretta house. And I also visited the Villa Guardamunt, which is the house that Nijinsky lived in when he was in Switzerland. I also photographed everything in that house. And the strangest thing was that in Nijinsky's time, he had rented the entire house. But now it was in apartments. And in the lower apartment, there was, I noticed on the name tag, it said H.C. Wagner. H.C. Wagner is a friend of mine in Hamburg who had at that time a clothing shop, a men's clothing shop. And when I was in confusion about starting my ballet, I called H.C. Wagner and said, strange idea, I would like to spend a night or a weekend in the Villa Guardamunt. And he said, you know, I'm here right now waiting for the movers because the house is being torn down. And I sent my friend immediately there. So I have pieces of that house. I have a little piece of wood from the balcony where he was said to have trained. I have some shingles, a few of which I gave to Tamara Nijinsky because she apparently was conceived in the Villa Guardamunt. And she was very touched by that. And also the room in the Soubretta house does not exist anymore. It only exists now on the stage of the Semperoper in Dresden, in Hamburg, and the National Ballet of Canada has another one. But all the detail of that room is cinematically reconstructed in this set, which is quite special, I think. When I choose a dancer to be Nijinsky, I first of all do not look for a dancer who is 5'4", which is what Nijinsky, how tall Nijinsky was. 5 feet 4 inches tall. I look for a special quality. Even as I originally created it, I created the first 2 solos on 4 men, not knowing which of whom would be Nijinsky. I wanted to see how much they would project to me something of the quality. And over the years and over the different productions in Hamburg, in Canada, also in Australia, there have been very, very different Nijinskys, because I don't believe in imitation. I think that it's, I don't find it a very interesting way of speaking about a person, trying to look as much as possible as you can like him, because I think what is important is the spiritual quality of the person rather than the actual physical look of the person. So, I mean, first of all, it's a person, the dancer has to have a very strong technique, because what I have choreographed for them to do combines both classical technique as well as forms of contemporary dance. So they have to be very strong. They have to have a great stamina, because Nijinsky is on the stage almost the entire evening, although there are 3 other men who represent other aspects of him as a dancer in particular roles. I mean, his sexuality, his sensuality, his eroticism, his androgynous quality that he had in Spectra, or even as Harlequin. So I don't know. I don't preconceive, first of all, what I'm looking for. I rather be surprised by something that touches me in a dancer. And that which touches me in a dancer is something which comes from inside, which is not simply their technique or their physical look. All 3 of those who are Nijinsky are also doing other roles. Stanislav is, for example, the androgynous side of him, the rose, the Harlequin figure, and Joseph is the more sensual, erotic side, as the golden slave and as the faun. And of course, I believe that all of these are part of him. And there's a very important scene in the ballet when he proposed to Romola, to his wife, on the ship Avon, on the way to South America. And I choreograph a scene which is based on that idea. And in her eyes, he is the faun. And we know from some of the writings of Romola that she found Nijinsky extremely erotic. And so I did it basically a pas de trois, so that whilst Nijinsky is, as a person, is dancing with her, she is actually seeing him as the faun. So I think all of those aspects together make up Nijinsky. At the same time, I feel in the end we do need to have one character, one person, one man who in a sense incorporates in some sense all of those qualities at the same time. Extremely important is his sister Bronislava, because they were extremely close, and I believe in a very, first I think the family as children together with Stanislav, they were extremely close, and I believe that she shared his desire for creation. Obviously she created herself later, and particularly in Les Noces, I think continued a sense of a new form of choreography that he had started with L'après-midi. So she's a very important character. Diaghilev is, of course, very important. There is his mother is also in the piece. His mother is there is a kind of double role, because there is a doctor. We call him the doctor. We don't know that he's a doctor necessarily, but because Romola did have an affair with a doctor as his illness began, and the wife of that doctor is, in fact, Nijinsky's mother, because his father was also very a woman's man, and left the family very early for another mistress. So, and then there are, of course, the aspects of the ballet Russe. I use for the first part of the ballet Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade as a kind of a symbol, a sign for that kind of erotic, exotic work that so overwhelmed Paris in 1909. And in that we see what we call the boxed dancers. But all of the choreography is, I mean, none of the choreography is reconstruction of anything. Sometimes we might glimpse a pose that could be taken from a photograph, a posture that seems typical from photographs that we know, but there was no attempt to use for example, Nijinsky's score for L'Après-Midi to try to do the same moves that he did. The faun has a completely other function within the ballet. The costumes are also not reconstructed in that sense, but rather my attempt was to achieve the same sort of reaction that might happen, the shock of seeing a man in a pink costume. The rose is much more naked in my version, as is the faun, and which probably was the effect that this character and this costume might have had at that time.